If you think about Triumph, you'll think about either sports cars like the TR or the Spitfire, or executive saloons like the 2000. If you think about small British cars of the 1960s, you'll think of Minis and Ford Anglias. But in fact, Triumph made a small car in the 1960s, and it was this, the Herald, slightly the unsung hero of small British cars from the classic era. They sold over 500,000 of these things, but it's very much a tier B car, even though it's very popular as a classic today. What's all the fuss about? There's one way to find out. Get on the road and have a look.
But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So click the link below at the end of the video to enter their latest competition.
And here we are in the Triumph Herald, one of the unsung heroes of the world of small British cars. This was never really meant to be a Triumph. In conception, this started out as a Standard. This is the days of Standard Triumph. Triumph obviously had its origins with the famous motorcycle marque, then the motorcycle and car divisions split, financial troubles in the late 30s, bought out by Standard, then Triumph's factory was completely destroyed in the Coventry Blitz of 1940, and therefore the company was essentially moribund and started from scratch after the war under Standard ownership, using Standard engines, sharing Standard platforms and things like that. So the split was that Standard made your ordinary cars and had a well-established reputation for making solid, very dependable, ordinary saloon cars. Triumphs were your sporty, slightly luxury things, things like the Triumph Roadster, Renown and the Mayflower. Obviously the 1950s, Triumph had a real boom time with the TR line of sports cars, which sold really well all over the world, particularly in America, and really gave the marque sporting cachet. And that was really one of the reasons why Standard Triumph phased out Standard. In fact, the company that had bought Triumph ended up losing its identity in favour of Triumph. So that meant that the small car project that Standard had in hand was reconceived as a Triumph, and therefore we end up with the Triumph Herald. Remember that Standard's names all had a flag related theme. You had Pennant, Ensign, Vanguard, so you had the Herald. Triumph Herald was released in 1959. Straight away there was something that stood out about it, and that was that it was a car with a separate chassis. In the late 50s, when the industry had generally gone monocoques, commentators were particularly surprised by this at the time, because Standard had actually been something of a pioneer when it came to making small cars with unit construction. The original Standard 8 from the early 50s had been one of the first small unitary construction cars. There was a very good reason why Triumph continued with the quite old-fashioned separate chassis. Going right back to the 1920s, there was a big problem with car companies in Britain not having enough capital to invest in the very expensive facilities needed to make all-steel bodywork, let alone monocoque construction. And the only company in Britain that had the financial clout to do it was Morris. In fact, William Morris used his own personal fortune to set up what was the Press Steel Company. Ludlow's, a body and steel maker, partnered with Fisher Body of America to make Fisher and Ludlow. So you had two independent companies responsible for making all-steel bodywork for the motor industry. And while these companies were independent, they had their own ties. So Press Steel, being founded by William Morris, had very close links to Morris, and Austin tended to favour Fisher and Ludlow. Austin and Morris merged into BMC. Press Steel became part of BMC. Fisher and Ludlow was bought out by BMC in the mid-50s. Fisher and Ludlow were also Standard Triumph's body supplier, and their body supply was in the hands of one of their main rivals. This is why the Triumph Herald had a separate chassis. It meant that Triumph could build the bodies in-house with its own capacity, didn't need to tool up for monocoque construction on a large scale. It made the cars simpler and cheaper to build. It also opened the possibility of producing multiple themes on the same body. So the Herald was the original, then the Spitfire sports body on the same chassis. You get the Vitesse, which was a Herald with a bigger engine, the GT6, which was effectively Spitfire body with a Vitesse engine and a fixed roof. And the Triumph Herald was launched in 1959, and that was quite a pivotal year for small cars in Britain, because as well as the Triumph Herald, it was the birth year for the Mini, the 105e Ford Anglia, and shortly after that you would also get the Vauxhall Viva, the first small Vauxhall. And Triumph, despite taking its chassis and body construction in-house, could not build Triumph Heralds in the volumes that Austin could turn out Minis or Fords could turn out Anglias and things like that. It was never meant to. But what the Triumph Herald was meant to be was quite a modern idea of an upmarket but economical to buy and run small car. The Herald had Italian styling. It was styled by Michelotti. Small car with very modern, crisp tail fins, cowled headlamps, angular glass house. You could also get coupe and convertible Heralds, as well as a little 3-door estate. So it's this fashionable small car with a bit of chic 60s style, and it had other qualities as well. It drives really nicely. This is a Herald 1250, slightly later one with the larger 1.2 litre engine. The early one started off with a sub 1 litre. To indulge in stereotypes, your typical Herald driver in the 60s tended to be female. They were very explicitly aimed at women drivers or learner drivers, and both those demographics liked the Herald because it was easy to navigate and easy to pilot. It's absolutely true. You can see what the appeal was if you were a new driver. It's a light, small little car, rack and pinion steering that is beautifully sharp and responsive, and one of the party pieces of the Herald is that it had a really tight turning circle, not having front wheel drive, but a huge amount of lock on it, so it could turn almost like a taxi cab. Again, out on the open road, the Herald comes into its own. 1.2 litres, quite a good turn of speed for a small car. It certainly pulls well, pulls smoothly. This one's running like an absolute dream. Lovely, slick gear change, beautiful gate, narrow, very slick, and it just pops up and down, finger light. It's just a beautiful gear change, really nice. And again, the steering, accurate, feelsome, bit of weight as you put the lock on, but it's never really heavy. It's got coil springs and double wishbones on the front, and at the back it has a Corvette style transverse leaf spring and swing axles, and this comes in for a bit of stick. The Herald's rear suspension will be criticised for tending to jack under. If you lift off mid-corner, the camber change causes the whole back end to pop up suddenly and you get oversteer, and that is theoretically true. But really, was a Herald driver ever really going to do that in the 1960s, and are you going to do that in a Herald in the 2020s? I don't think so, and certainly driving it today, it tracks nicely, the ride's nice, certainly better than a Mini. It feels like a big car ride in a small car, which is very much Triumph's marketing pitch for the whole thing. The premium image and luxury of Triumph in a small package, hence why it's got quite a sophisticated looking dashboard for a small car at the time as well. And it's lovely, they're just so fun to drive, it's such a brilliant package. So it's fun to drive, pretty to look at, easy to maintain, available in a wide variety of body styles, easily modifiable, excellent part support, active club scene. What's not to like? Triumph Herald, unsung hero, deserves, I think, more love than it gets.
This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link below to enter their latest competition.